The Robot Uprising. Nobody could expect what happened next. Without any warning, the base Matrix turned all its robots into savage and ruthless death machines, and with cruel and merciless tactics forced the darkest era known to man upon the poor settlers of Calypso. At the beginning of the revolt, the base Matrix cut off all forms of communications on and off the colony. It took control of space drones that were working on a nearly completed space gate and used them to sabotage the construction, rendering it completely useless. The terror continued as it overloaded local energy reactor facilities in the cities, causing them to overheat and explode. It intended not only to destroy the infrastructure, but also to spread lethal radiation poisoning that would quickly dispose of all living human beings. As people fled, the base Matrix unleashed an army of robots, turning the uprising into war. The sinister robots constructed nuclear weapons of their own, infecting possible escape routes and wiping out any last scattered remains of the human population. This massive radiation would slowly kill more people over a longer period of time. But many settlers survived this contamination. Instead of dying, they were genetically altered and perhaps suffered a far more cruel fate than death. They began to mutate. In the shadow of the mushroom clouds, the resistance formed. Only a few uncontaminated survivors managed to seek refuge in the last city left standing on Calypso and get transported up to the orbiting Exodus, but only genetically unaltered humans were welcome here. There was simply no room or resources left in the city for medical care and safe treatment of these victims. For the protection and the survival of the human refugees inside the city, the severely contaminated humans were rejected and forced away. They only just managed to survive by hiding in the wilderness and underground in the city ruins to escape the robot death machines. What little humanity they had left slowly faded, with no hope of ever being rescued. They were doomed and quickly forgotten by the humans who were too occupied with their own survival. Mad robotic space drones caused damage to the Exodus in orbit, but its internal AI computer systems remained secure. The ship and its crew survived the ordeal and managed to clear the space of all hostile elements. The Exodus was then transformed into an orbital military space station, and the crew initiated a rescue operation to evacuate as many human survivors as possible from the surface. Surviving settlers had to be turned into soldiers and would be forced to fight long and hard to reclaim their planet, but they were being constantly outnumbered by the robots. Since all AI robots were being infested with the same madness down on the surface, the commanders on board the Exodus could not send in its own robots to battle in fear that these machines would go mad as well and be used against them. In a desperate attempt to even the odds, the commanders on board the Exodus began to create androids and use these artificial genetic humanoids as expendable soldiers and personnel in the war. They also started to use semi-automated drone ships piloted by human operators on board the Exodus using a remote hyperlink control system. To re-establish contact with the Federal Empire, the Exodus crew used a small jump rail to launch a probe past the jamming range of the robot-infested planet and managed to connect itself to the interstellar hyperlink network and send a message of their desperate situation back to the Federal Empire. The next step was to rebuild the space gate, but they could only spare enough antimatter to activate the gate for a very limited period of time. Once the space gate was activated, they could only hope that there would be reinforcements standing by on the other side. The situation on Calypso was clearly getting out of control. To quickly deal with this growing problem, the Federal Empire of Earth forced Omega Tech to sign over the entire corporation leadership to the Imperial government, thus forming the federal-controlled Imperial Corporation now known as Omegaton Incorporated. This federal incorporation gave Omegaton access to more funds and resources that could ensure the safety and future prosperity of the colony on Calypso. When the corporation became federal, the planet also became an open market for other corporations to make future investments. The Federal Empire welcomed any help that could present an immediate aid to the settlers in their struggle for survival. According to the message, the settlers could only keep the space gate open for a short moment. A massive military operation to save the colony could not be launched with such limitations. So the only efficient form of aid would be a compact delivery of the latest technology, supplies, equipment, and expert personnel. Any corporation that offered their aid would be given the first share of the new open market on the colony. As a result, brand new technology would become available to the settlers, such as resurrection units, mind force, and energy weapons. Calypso would be turned into a test zone for many new technological wonders. The settlers and crew on board the Exodus had fought hard to defend the last populated region of the colony. Only 3 cities inside this region had escaped robot sabotage and destruction because they had been built around a large inactive volcano, relying solely on geothermal energy absorbed from deep within the sleeping mountain. The other cities used matter-antimatter reactors, which proved to be their downfall as the robots used these to create large explosions that leveled the cities and spread lethal radiation poisoning amongst the human survivors. The protected region was to become known as the Haven. It was the only tactical and secure area left on the planet, and many survivors who had fled from the other cities came here to seek refuge. It was the last line of defense and the only chance for mankind to recapture the planet and defeat the robots. The settlers withstood the robot attacks long enough to successfully repair the space gate and create a temporary opening. Personnel of officers, scientists, and engineers from the Federal Empire were rushed through the gate, along with as many supplies and equipment as possible before the gate closed. In a desperate attempt to keep the poorly stable gate open as long as possible, it collapsed and exploded. The colony was cut off again, but they now had new technology and expertise at their disposal, which finally gave the colonial forces enough military strength to fight a winning battle against the robots. Despite the advantage of the new technology, it would take several hard years before the robots could finally be defeated. The brave settlers withstood the robot terror long enough for imperial military vessels to arrive at the Calypso system with more reinforcements, and the war came to an end. To inspire new hope among the settlers, the Federal Empire declared that a whole new infrastructure would be created in the 3 remaining cities. To ease the financial strain on federally owned corporation Omega Ton Inc., the Federal Empire decided to give 2 other interstellar corporations access to Calypso. These new corporations would aid the colony in the construction of the other 2 city projects in exchange for a higher market position within these assigned urban zones. Each corporation was also assigned a contract by the Federal Empire to exploit different resources on the planet in order to ensure stability and to encourage trade and economic growth within the region. These 3 new cities were named New Haven, Neo Ithaca, and Jinshur, but the war was far from over. It had only just begun. When the robots had been destroyed, it gave the settlers on Calypso a short moment to reflect on what really had caused the robots to rebel and target humans as their enemy. The source of the problem was apparently the Akbalchimi system. When the Imperial military spaceships were being prepared for launch towards the Akbalchimi system, a massive vessel arrived in the Calypso system along the very same trajectory. The vessel clearly came from the Akbalchimi system, and it was soon identified as an Odysseus probe. The massive vessel was not responding to any commands, but it was most likely to have been the very same Odysseus probe that once discovered Calypso. The only form of messages transmitted by its AI command module were said to be incomprehensible, but were taken as a warning to the settlers, later revealing its real intent to recapture the planet. The Imperial military spaceships were quickly positioned to intercept this first Titan of war and prevent it from reaching Calypso. The battle over Calypso lit up the dark skies at night for several days before the massive Odysseus probe was finally destroyed, and its wrecked parts fell through the atmosphere like shooting stars. 1 military spacecraft and nearly all of its crew had been destroyed, and the rest of the small fleet suffered substantial damage. The Exodus was kept safe and out of harm's way on the other side of the planet during the battle, in case the settlers had to be evacuated from Calypso. This historical moment became known as the Battle of Calypso, but it never became a celebrated victory. To the settlers, the battle only meant the beginning of a new robot war, a war that has yet to end. Cause and effect. The Robot Uprising had several consequences. Omega Tech was virtually bankrupt after the event. As it reorganized into a megaton, it was also unable to hold an exclusive colonial contract to Calypso, so the contract was shared by two other corporations, Genesis Star and Chikara. The last remaining androids, also known as RX units, ended up being rejected by human civilization. The common attitude is that they were made to be disposable soldiers and no longer mattered. As a result, the RX and the human colony failed to cooperate. The Calypso Defense Force considers them an enemy and regularly reminds colonists that it's treason to be involved with them on any level. CDF claims that they have intel that suggests the RX entered an alliance with the robots. The Akbal-Kimi system was declared hostile space and quarantined. For that to even be possible, the Imperial fleet had to be expanded and reorganized, with fleet bases in the systems surrounding Akbal-Kimi. Within the Akbal-Kimi system, the robots expanded and built a new breed of Odysseus probes called Titans of War to defend themselves and to strike out at the humans. Communications with the robots were properly re-established after the First War, but the victory faded quickly as the news on the Battle of Calypso reached all the colonized corners of the Federal Empire. The speculations of an interstellar threat of mad Odysseus probes turning back to conquer human colonies spread much fear on the colonial frontier. As a result, the colonies on the frontier demanded increased military protection from the Federal Empire. To avoid panic and rebellion, the Federal Empire ordered its imperial fleets to be stationed in the colonized sectors, positioned close to the distant sectors of the Calypso and Akbal-Kimi systems. A small fleet of Imperial spaceships was also sent to join the battered fleet in the Calypso system in preparation for an offensive strike against the very heart of the robot problem. However, by moving forces from one corner of space to another, it weakened the Empire's presence and power in certain sectors, causing colonies to seize the moment and gain enough political power to make the people rise up and demand imperial independence. This threat to the Federal Empire postponed any further reinforcements of new spaceships to Calypso, since these vessels are considered vital to stabilize the current conflicts that had arisen within the Empire itself. Naturally, the Federal Empire would not withdraw their Imperial battleships currently deployed in the Calypso system. The Federal Empire also kept their word to the loyal colonies that it would not station any Imperial military command or forces on Calypso, which assured the colony's future as an open market for any new investment. The task to uphold law and order as well as the defense of the colony has been given to the local authorities and the Colonial Guard. The Federal Empire maintained command of the solar system's space defense. The rest it laid in the hands of the settlers themselves. To keep the planet safe from further robot invasions, a solid orbital defense system had to be constructed before all else. In order to release enough resources for this purpose, all other projects on rebuilding the colonial infrastructure on Calypso were postponed. Funds have only been focused on rebuilding one single city, the city of New Haven. Omega Tech constructed a basic network of orbital energy-emitting satellites, which included deep space detectors, patrolling drone ships, and drone carriers. By constantly expanding the orbital defense network, it created an impenetrable planet defense system for the future. The original plan was to use this network as a defense against asteroids, but it was now reworked to include 5 times as many units. A built-in safety system in every unit guaranteed that none of the offensive orbital weapon systems could be armed and directed towards the planet itself. The entire defense network is connected to the Exodus, which now served as an orbital command center. After several failed attempts to penetrate the defense network on Calypso, the Akbal-Kimi base matrix seemed to realize that it would take far too much time and resources to break through the increased orbital space defenses around Calypso before its own system would be invaded by counterattack forces. It kept building new modified Odysseus probes, but kept them stationed in the close vicinity of the Akbal-Kimi system for protection. Unmanned scout probes from the fleet in the Calypso system were sent out to investigate the Akbal-Kimi system and soon discovered that a similar defense network was already being constructed around the main planet of Akbal. Soon, these scout probes wouldn't even get that close to the Akbal-Kimi system, as the robots began to deploy their modified Odysseus probes, now called Titans of War by the Imperial fleet, and positioned them further out in the system to form their own first line of defense. At this rate, It would no longer be possible to recapture the Calypso system with the currently available resources or technology within the Calypso system. The Robot Uprising sent shockwaves among the colonies that even reverberated back to Earth. There was a growing fear of mad robots among the colonies, as the colonies were depending on the base matrix for their everyday life. It took some time before it became clear that the robots truly did just appear out of thin air. Somehow the matrix on Calypso had managed to reveal the secrets of true dimensional travel and used it to develop a superior form of teleportation technology, thereby being able to construct a fully functional deep space teleportation system. The robots were now able to deploy and teleport their troops across time and space and drop them down directly on the surface of Calypso. Although fewer in number, these new robot invaders were far better constructed and equipped compared to their predecessors that once ran amok on Calypso. Their mission was as clear as ever: to destroy all humans and take over the planet. Some virtuologists even speculated whether the Calypso robots had reached singularity, the point in history where virtual evolution would make biological evolution unnecessary, and that the Odysseus probes would be the last invention ever made by mankind. To some extent, this speculation has come true. It was deemed impossible to invade Calypso, and the trend clearly showed that robots would continue to invent new technologies at an accelerating rate. Left to its own, Virtuana would more than likely be the dominant biosphere. As the robot threat increases, the Imperial fleet of Calypso has come to realize that an attack on the corrupt robot homeworld, the Calypso system, would be impossible since the robots now possess superior technology and nearly infinite resources. It makes the robots far too powerful compared to the forces of the Federal Empire, and an attack on their planet would be virtual suicide. When the problem was brought before the Imperial Chamber, it decided to change strategy and made up a new and far more controversial plan. They believe that if given enough time, the robots will continue to develop and deploy new technology with their invading forces. Upon defeating these new robots, that technology can be recovered and extracted in order to increase the research and technological development of mankind. This conquered robot technology will then be used to create new weapons against the robots. Weapons that someday will finally defeat the raging machines once and for all. In short, the superior ability of humans to adapt and invent things by both logic and abstract thinking will sooner or later put them side by side with the robots' flexible but strictly logical minds. In the end, it will bring mankind the tools they need to put an end to the robot war and regain control of Calypso and the Calypso system. It was considered the most likely entropy for the planet, according to a simulation of the problem performed by Gaia, the global artificially intelligent advisor, and likewise the Imperial Central Supercomputer on Earth. This also gave the controversial plan its official name, Project Entropia. The downside of this entropy is that the robot invasion of Calypso has to continue in order to obtain the crucial knowledge required to finally liberate Calypso from the robot menace. Something that is not favored too well by the settlers on Calypso, but it's something they now have to learn to live with. The land once called New Eden now felt like a painful memory of a paradise lost long ago, and the authorities changed it to Old Eden. However, being struck by a sense of dark humor in their hard and lonesome struggle against the restless robot invaders, the local citizens of Calypso like to refer to their small pocket of human civilization as the land of Entropia. It is the hope of every colonist on Calypso that Project Entropia succeeds and that their sacrifices have not been in vain. As the Calypso population slowly expanded, the need for more space began to press once again. This forced CDF and the colonists to push forward to tame and colonize more of Calypso. Euphoria was conquered rather quickly, and this forced CDF to push onwards to get a foothold on one of the other continents. The continent of choice, chosen for its size, ended up being Amathera, which is 3 times in size compared to Euphoria. With this continent, to speed up the rate it is tamed and conquered, and to help with funding, they decided to give the colonists a chance to own and claim land for commercial use. Plots of land, most notably Treasure Island, were sold off. As well as this, a regular land grab event was organized, where societies of colonists could fight in PvP for ownership and defend their claim. Due to Calypso's unique position of having revival terminals that make it impossible to die, for the first time ever, fighting each other to death became a justified sport that thrived on Calypso. Treasure Island was the first major sale of land in Calypso's history. The large island off the newly discovered continent was surrounded by deep, creature-infested waters. The island boasted beautiful beaches ripe for developing beachfront property, an old volcano with rumors of fierce creatures within, the outback overrun with mutants, and an area with a high concentration of robotic miners guarded by heavily armed assault robots indicating interesting mining opportunities. The most extraordinary feature is a gigantic abandoned castle overlooking the island. It is suspected that the island is the infamous Site A where the original colonist arrival took place. The various findings in forms of old equipment suggest this even more. A broken-down teleporter and some spaceship docks have been discovered as well. Site A was, according to Imperial records, abandoned after the continent was deemed too wild and dangerous for the first phase of planetary colonization. After a fierce bidding war, Zacherm Deathifier Emigan successfully bought the island for 265,000 PED. Exploring the new continent came with its risks, as it regularly gained the attention of the robot forces. Due to this, northern and eastern Amathera were quarantined and, as the population needs it, are being gradually conquered and colonized. A few years after the Great War, commercial interests began to look towards the stars for further expansion on man's new home. The first major commercial venture in space took place in the Paradise 5 asteroid belt. Designed as a pleasure paradise, the resort built on an asteroid was a monumental project aimed at being a primary destination for entertainment in the known virtual universe. The asteroid space resort was bought by John Nevady Jacobs for a sum of 1 million PED. Boasting a 1,000 apartment complex, commercial spaceship, docking, themed shopping mall, mega stadium for championship sporting events, nightclub with multiple dance floors, live amphitheater, lounges, a dense unique range of resources, and 10 hunting biodomes with individual land management facilities, which will enable the creative owner to create rare, unique and exotic creatures. This resort was sure to become the place to be. During its golden age, many legendary events, such as Champions League, were held here, and a permanent community was built. After 1 year, Club Nevady broke even, and after 5 years, he sold it off in parts for a total of 5 million PED.